Blue dusk over Dusty Creek. A stagecoach hisses, brakes grinding. A widow steps down, calm eyes, a worn carpet bag. On the porch, a quiet cowboy holds a letter that buys land if he returns her. Two hard brothers show a deed. The sheriff folds a warrant, waits. The cowboy lowers his hat. "Ma'am, you're safe here." She bakes, plants, tries to belong. A black storm rips the garden flat. Rumors turn to handcuffs. He opens a ledger, finds the line they hid. At dawn, horses crowd his fence. Will he trade a life for land, or make the law stand? Blue dusk pooled along the draws beyond Bitter Mesa when the letter came, its seal pressed crooked, its edges dust-gritted from 40 hard miles. Sam Dalton turned it in his hands on the porch rail, a man measuring the weight of words before he let them in. The envelope smelled faintly of lamp oil and sweat. Inside, a single sheet in a clerk's tidy hand offered a bargain that didn't feel like one at all. Accept a special delivery and sign a border strip. Deed within 7 days. And the Pike brothers would cede him a narrow run of graze along the east fence. Land Sam needed to carry his herd through summer. Refuse, and they'd shut him out of the only water his cattle could reach without a day's push. Sam read it twice, then a third time for the poison hidden in the politeness. He set the page atop his ledger, open to a neat line where he had totaled salt, beans, and a farrier's fee, and watched the road. The stagecoach crested the last rise at twilight, harness jingling, brake squealing. A woman stepped down from the rear, steady on the rutted dirt, carpetbag in hand. She was plain in a way that suggested hunger and long miles, but her eyes were clear and taking stock. The driver tipped his hat, muttered, "Name's Evelyn Pierce," and handed Sam a folded receipt that looked too much like a bill of sale to suit him. The Pike brothers sat their horses beyond the boundary fence, silhouettes against the dying light, hats low. Brock Pike raised a buell. Hand, 2 fingers like a mock salute. Harlan laughed and said something the wind carried away. Sheriff Harwood stood near the hitch rail down by the road, a folded paper tucked into his belt, pretending to study the sunset. Sam felt the old pinch in his chest, the one that came when a thing wasn't right, and his first instinct was to step back and let it pass. He had paid for that reflex once, years ago, watching a rumor chew up his younger brother while Sam kept his mouth shut, thinking time would sort it. It hadn't. Time never does a job you leave on its back. "Ma'am," he said, and touched the brim of his hat. "Sam Dalton. This place is Bitter Mesa Ranch." "Evelyn will do," she answered, voice even, northern soft. "Thank you for receiving me." "You have supper?" he asked. "I can make one," she said, and lifted the bag. "If you keep flour." He stepped aside. "House rules," he said, hearing how deliberate his voice sounded. "Separate rooms, separate chores, no promises either way. You're safe. On this porch and under this roof. We'll sort the rest in daylight." Her gaze flicked to the ridge where the brothers waited. "I understand sorting." Inside, the kitchen accepted her like it had been waiting. Within minutes, a quiet order took hold. The scrape of a spoon, the soft thud of dough on boards, the murmur of a stovetop coming warm. Sam fetched water and set plates. He didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers. The wind did most of the talking, sliding under the door and rattling a tin cup, as if to remind them both that this was still New Mexico territory, where law rode hard and mercy often came late. They ate simple: biscuits, a pan of eggs, coffee gone thin. She ate like a person who had learned to make each bite count. When he set the letter beside his cup, she glanced at it and then away, as if touching it with her eyes might make it hers. "You cook steady," he said. "Work is how I quiet my head," she replied. "If there's a garden, I can set it straight." "There's a lot. Needs setting," he said. "Garden's mostly weeds and prayer." "Prayer grows best with hands on it," she said, and the corner of her mouth almost smiled. They kept to the rules. He showed her the spare room, a narrow bed, a quilt faded to gentle colors. He left a lamp on the trunk and a chipped cup on the windowsill. On the way back down the hall, he passed the nail where his father's pocket watch used to hang and felt again the hollow, made by losses that never announced themselves. Sam slept light. He woke before dawn to the low thump of a cupboard door and the faint rhythm of kneading. Coffee rose in the air, stitched with the clean smell of soap. When he stepped onto the porch, he found his gloves set on the rail where he never left them, fingers aligned, palms dust-free. Out in the half-light, Evelyn stood at the garden lot, measuring the ground with her eyes, hands folded around a small trowel like a promise. On the ridge, 2 riders sat their horses, dark against the morning, Brock and Harlan again, patient as crows. A slow clatter of hoofbeats rolled up from the road, too many for a neighborly call. Trouble was a thing you could hear before you saw it. By mid-morning, the house had a rhythm that wasn't there the night before. Evelyn set plates to drying on a flour sack and mended a curtain where the sun had chewed it threadbare. Sam fixed a loose hinge, then left his work gloves on the porch rail again. He told himself it was habit. She picked them up without a word, turned them once in her hands, and laid them where a man could find them. At noon she carried bread to the table, brown crust, clean heat rising, and they ate in a quiet that felt less like distance and more like a truce. Garden sits low, she said, glancing toward the lot. Floodline shows here. She tapped her wrist. Might raise the rows. Take what you need from the shed, Sam said. Shovel's sharp enough. She walked the fence with a piece of twine and a small stick, measuring in her own way. On the ridge, Brock and Harlan Pike lingered like weather that wouldn't move on, their horses stamping board circles in the dust. Sheriff Harwood rode up the draw about 2, slowed near them, and the 3 men spoke with their hats down. Sam watched from the porch, jaw set. He could not hear a word, but the shape of it looked like a plan being agreed to. Toward evening, the sky gathered itself. Wind curled under the eaves. A wall of gray slid out of the west, with speed enough to make the chickens go strange. Evelyn had planted a neat line of starter rows, onions, a hopeful scattering of bean seed, and anchored them with stones. "It'll pass," she said, as if saying it could make it so. It did not pass. Rain came hard and mean, sheets of it, beating the soil flat. The garden lot turned to a single dark plate. Sam ran for the gate and swung it open so the flow could find the wash, instead of the house. He came back soaked through, hat brim dripping, and found Evelyn standing at the window, shoulders tight, one hand at her throat. "I'll set it right in the morning," she said, too quickly. "It's only work. It's always only work." He set a towel beside her. "We'll start again," he said. "Ground keeps what it can." The storm burned itself out near midnight. At first light, she tied her hair back with a strip of calico and waded into the mess. She moved with a steady patience, scooping silt from the furrows, writing stones, whispering to herself in a way that sounded like prayer, not aimed at heaven, but at courage. Sam shoveled beside her until the sun climbed. When they paused, she let the trowel rest and looked at him full on. "My husband drank," she said, the words flat as ledger lines. "He came home angry. The night he went, he shoved me at the stairs. I fell. He fell after. His brother said I pushed. I didn't." She swallowed. "They said I was bad luck, that he'd made a will to cut me off, only it never turned up. They packed a bag and called it mercy." Sam listened without moving. "Man doesn't fix a wound by talking it closed. You're here now," he said, "and while you are, nobody takes you where you don't choose to go." Hoofbeats climbed the road then, impatient, iron on stone. Brock and Harlan came straight to the fence, reins short, faces worked into something like concern, and nothing like it at all. Behind them, Sheriff Harwood trailed slow. "Morning," Brock called, voice bright. "We come on a delicate errand. Mrs. Pierce, you've had your night to rest. Time to return to family business. No hard feelings." Evelyn's hands closed around the top slat, knuckles pale. Sam stepped forward, palms open. "She's under my roof," he said, "and this is my line. You know the markers." Harlan lifted a folded deed, edges smudged from too many hands. "Boundaries get redrawn, Dalton," he said. "Soon as your generous deal is signed. Border strip for a lady's safe return. Sheriff's here to see it done decent." Harwood kept his eyes on the middle distance, voice low. "Keep tempers. Calm." Sam shook his head. "Deal smells wrong. Paper says border strip, but it ties to an original patent like a calf on a short rope. Too slick by half." Brock smiled, all teeth. "You read too much for a cowhand." "I read enough," Sam said. "Enough to know you don't trade a person like a sack of oats. And enough to know water rights live in the small print." The road from town offered an answer he didn't expect. June Avery, the schoolteacher, tall, neat, a woman who believed in ink and witnesses, walked up with an old prospector ambling beside her, hat brim bent from a lifetime of weather. Hank Tolliver, folks called him, a man who had panned every creek within 20 miles and had the maps to prove it. June lifted a hand. "Morning, Sheriff." "Morning, gentlemen. Sam?" She nodded at Evelyn. "I was at the office yesterday to order readers. Saw some filings that didn't sit right. Mr. Tolliver says your dates don't match across ledgers." Hank scratched his jaw. "Folio numbers got swapped, looks. Like or faked by someone who don't respect numbers. Happens when a man tries to hide a spring." Brock's smile thinned. "Teacher talk and gold dust don't make law." "Neither does a lie," June said, mild and iron both. Harwood shifted in the saddle, eyes narrowing, the warrant at his belt suddenly heavier than paper. Wind lifted the edge of the suspect deed. Out beyond the ridge, more riders gathered in twos and threes, drawn by the rumor of a taking. "Bring your clerk," Sam said to the sheriff, steady as fence posts. "Let the book speak. Until then, nobody crosses this line without her say-so." Evelyn set the trowel on the post and stood beside him. For the first time since she'd stepped off the stage, she looked less like freight and more like a person choosing ground. On the ridge, a fresh dust plume rose, news traveling faster than truth. What would the books reveal when daylight reached the county desk? Sam spread the Pike deed and the letter on the kitchen table like a doctor laying out. Instruments. The lamp threw a hard circle of light. Outside, the night hummed with crickets and the far creak of cottonwoods along the wash. Evelyn rinsed the last cup and dried her hands, then stood a careful step back, as if the papers might spit. "Read it slow," Sam said, more to himself than to her. He dragged a finger under the lines, lips moving. "Border strip to be conveyed upon return of said person to kin, survey by private agent, reference, original patent, Book A, Folio 113. He stopped. "There's the slick." Evelyn's eyes lifted. "What does that mean?" "Most men don't cite the original patent unless they're hiding behind it," Sam said. "Patent's the first grant from Washington. If a man dies without children, heir at law is the spouse. If there's no true waiver, any later deal that assumes she's gone is wind." He tapped the page. "They're counting on nobody bothering to look." June Avery knocked once and let herself in. A stack of school primers tucked under one arm and a pencil behind her ear. Hank Tolliver followed, hat in his hands, boots cleaned as if he'd been to church. "I did some asking," June said, settling at the table. "County office opens at 7. Clerk on duty is Lucius Finch, patient sort if you speak his language, which is numbers and courtesy. He keeps Book A in a cabinet behind his desk. The key sits on a nail that moves every day so he feels safe." Her mouth twitched. "He also likes molasses cookies." Evelyn glanced at Sam. "I can bake those," she said, soft, wanting to help. Hank cleared his throat. "Also found out the Pike boys hired a surveyor last month, name of Dwayne Little. He's fast with a chain and faster with a bottle. If a map shows a spring on your east fence, I'll bet you a pan full of dust they left it off their price." Sam nodded, the old heat rising in him in a way he had learned to steer. "Water's the root of this," he said. "Border strip don't mean much without the seep that feeds the lower troughs." He looked at the deed again, then opened his ledger and wrote in the margin, "Office hours, 7 to 4. Clerk, Lucius Finch, Book A, Folio 113. Probate file, Pierce, County of San Miguel. Survey, Dwayne Little, Check Spring." He stopped, the pencil hovering. A memory crawled in. The way his younger brother had stood small in a saloon doorway while men told a story that wasn't true. And Sam had let it slide because he didn't want trouble. He swallowed the grit of it. "I kept quiet once," he said to the wood grain. "It cost someone I loved more than I knew." He lifted his eyes to Evelyn and June. "I'm not keeping quiet now." Evelyn's hands folded over the back of the chair. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me." "We're aiming to keep everyone unhurt," June said. "That's why paper and witnesses matter." Sam exhaled. "I need time in those books before the sheriff tries to move us. I need Harwood somewhere else at sunup." Hank scratched his jaw. "Could send him on a wild goose?" "No," Sam said. "A polite delay. He's not a villain. He's a man who likes easy roads. We'll give him one." He pulled a scrap of foolscap and wrote, "Sheriff Harwood, out of respect for order, I request a public reading at sunrise of any waiver the widow Pierce is said to have signed, with signatures witnessed at the school steps. Until then, no removal. Proof is coming at dawn." Samuel Dalton June read it, nodded. That pins him to town." "Hank," Sam said, "can you carry it to him? Slow enough he receives it late, but sure enough it's on his person." Hank grinned without showing teeth. "I'm good at slow." Evelyn touched the edge of the letter. "What if they come here anyway?" "Then I stand on the porch and repeat myself till my voice makes a fence," Sam said, "and you stay inside." She studied his face the way she had studied the garden, measuring for depth and slope. "I don't run," she said, "not anymore." He didn't ask her to. Instead, he stood, went to the cupboard, and pulled down flour and molasses. "Cookies for a clerk," he said. "We'll trade. Sweetness for keys." June smiled. "You learn fast." "Fear makes a man stubborn," Sam said, "but kindness opens drawers." They worked like a small crew. Evelyn shaped neat rounds on a tin. June drafted a list of questions for Finch regarding probate. Hank penciled a simple map from memory, marking the seep with an X and the date he first watered a burrow there. Sam folded their tools into his day: paper, cookies, a courteous note. Near midnight, wind tapped the shutters, light as knuckles. From the ridge came a lone coyote's call, high and thin. Sam closed the ledger and set it atop the deed, as if weight could keep truth from blowing away. He looked at the pocket on the wall, where a watch once hung, and felt time like a promise he could finally keep. "At sunrise," he said, almost to himself, "ink will speak." But would the books open their mouths before rumor closed them? Dusty Creek's churchyard filled with quilts and kettles, the kind of Sunday picnic that pretends trouble takes a Sabbath. Children chased each other between wagons, while men drifted to shade and talk that sounded friendly but wasn't. The Pikes arrived early, dressed respectable, hats brushed clean. Brock shook hands like a candidate. Harlan passed tin cups, grin easy, voice lower when he leaned in. "Terrible business," Brock told anyone who would hold his glance. "Brother died after a fall, widow gone wild. We're only trying to see her safe with family. Dalton means well. He's confused by paper." Harlan lifted a folded deed just enough to catch the sun. "Everything proper," he said. "Survey done. Donation to the church if we resolve it peaceable." Rumor moved the way smoke does, thin and everywhere. Mrs. Whitlow clucked that Evelyn's calm meant she was cold. The blacksmith muttered that a man protecting a stranger must have an angle. A pair of ranch hands who owed the Pikes fence wire said law was law, and the rest was feelings. Sam came late, hat in his hands, June on one side, Hank on the other. He looked like a man who knew crowds can tip a thing before the books ever open. Sheriff Harwood stood near the pie table, a neutral rock in a tight stream, watching which way the current pushed. When Sam reached him, he nodded once. "Morning, Sheriff," Sam said. "I sent you a note, asking for a public reading at sunrise. Any waiver they claim she signed. Witnesses present." Harwood touched his belt where the note sat folded. "I received it." "Good," Sam said. He raised his voice, not loud, just steady enough to carry. "Friends, if there's a waiver, read it in daylight. Names, witnesses, date. If there isn't, let the widow be." Brock's smile held. "Public theater, is it? Fine." He lifted his deed. "Mrs. Pierce signed her agreement to return. We'll bring it. Might spare the town a spectacle if Dalton simply honors a gentleman's bargain." June stepped forward, calm as a school bell. "A signature without witnesses is wind. I keep the register for every spelling bee. I can count who stands by their names." She turned to the crowd. "Who saw Mrs. Pierce sign anything? Raise your hand." Hands stayed busy with plates. Hank scratched the brim of his hat. "I've been thumbing ledgers for the better part of a week," he said. "Dates don't match. Your filing lines up with a day the clerk was off to bury his mama. Book shows a gap. Happens sometimes when a man tries to run two numbers with one hand." Harlan snorted. "You read rocks and think they're letters." "Rocks don't lie," Hank said. "Numbers can." A stir of voices followed, hot, then cooling. Harwood held up a palm. "No more shouting." He turned to Brock. "You'll produce that waiver at sunrise. School steps. We'll read it proper." Brock's eyes cut to Harlan, then back. He slipped a small folded paper to the sheriff with 2 fingers, casual as passing salt. "A list of names you might wish to call," he said. Harwood took it without looking, tucked it into his vest, and kept his face made of board. Sam saw the pass anyway, and so did June. Neither spoke. There are moments when saying less saves more. Evelyn had come because June asked her to be seen. She stood near the quilts, hands laced at her waist, dress plain and clean. A child brought her a slice of pie. She thanked him and didn't eat. When whispers bent toward her like tall grass, she lifted her chin. "I won't go anywhere I don't choose," she said. Not loud, but it reached. Mrs. Whitlow blinked. "Pride won't feed you." "No," Evelyn answered, "but truth will let me sleep." The preacher blessed the food, and plates moved again, though appetite thinned. Sam crossed to Evelyn. "You don't need this many eyes," he said. "I needed to see theirs," she replied, "to know what tomorrow costs." A gust lifted dust along the fence line, pointing toward the schoolhouse like a finger. The Pikes mounted, tipped hats as if leaving a donation, and rode out slow. Harwood lingered a minute longer, then drifted the other way, his vest pocket heavy with 2 papers that pointed in opposite directions. June pressed a slip of penciled questions into Sam's palm. Dates, folios, a line for spring omitted. Hank touched his shoulder. "Clerk's fond of cookies," he said. "Sweet keeps drawers from sticking." They walked Evelyn home the long way, past the school steps where morning would turn talk into ink. She kept tongue steady, skirts dusty at the hem from last night's fight with the garden. At the porch, she paused, eyes on the ridge. "They'll come early," she said. Sam nodded. "So will we." The sky dimmed to that uncertain purple that feels like a held breath. In the yard, the shovel leaned where he'd left it, a quiet promise. When dawn struck the county door, would truth open with it, or would someone's paper close it first? Before first light, Sam saddled in the dark and took the cedar draws instead of the road. He carried a neat tin of molasses cookies, June's penciled questions, and his own letter to the sheriff asking for a dawn reading. The town still slept. Only the blacksmith's cat watched, him tie off behind the courthouse well. Inside, the county office smelled of ink and old wood. Lucius Finch, thin as a broom and careful as a clock, was lighting lamps. He looked up over spectacles, saw the tin, and smiled like a door eased off a stubborn hinge. "Mr. Dalton." "Morning, Mr. Finch. We brought sweetness for sore eyes." Finch coughed a laugh. "Policy says Book A stays locked." He set the cookies near his blotter. "Policy also says a clerk may review filings for accuracy." He glanced toward the cabinet. "Accuracy sometimes requires a man to misplace a bundle long enough to find the right one." Sam met his gaze. "I aim to keep the law walking on its feet." Finch slid a key from a migrating nail, opened the cabinet, and lifted down a leather-bound volume worn smooth by a century of hands. "Book A," he said, "Folio 113. He flipped pages with practiced care, then touched a line with a finger that didn't shake. "Patent to Jeremiah Pierce. Clear title, no issue recorded. Heir at law under territorial code. Spouse, 1 Evelyn Pierce." He pulled a second packet from a labeled drawer. "Probate never closed, no waiver filed. Someone filed a survey after, but that can't outrun first papers." Sam breathed once, deep. "May I copy the references?" Finch nodded. "You may write what ink has already said." He slid over a scrap stamped with the county seal. "And you may ask for a clerk's notation that such and such exists. Certified copy will take till noon, but a notation walks faster." Sam wrote slow and exact. "Book A, Folio 113, Probate Pierce, file number, clerk's initials." He added one more line June had underlined. "Spring at East Boundary referenced in early township notes, not priced in later conveyance." Finch lifted an eyebrow. "You read careful." "Water makes or breaks us," Sam said. "Men hide it on paper when they can't steal it by shovel." Finch set his pen. "I will be at the school steps at sunrise. We will read what is, not what is wanted." Sam tipped his hat, left 2 cookies for the road, and stepped out into morning. By 8, the wind had turned mean. He reached Bitter Mesa to find the gate rope cut, and a scatter of cattle nosing the barley he'd saved for June's school fair. Fence staples lay bright in the dirt like pulled teeth. Tacked to the porch post, a broadside shouted in large letters, "Notice of fraud. Evelyn Pierce to be removed to family for her own safety." Signed in a hand that looked practiced, countersigned by no one. Evelyn stood in the yard, skirt hem muddy, jaw set. June was with her, face pale with fury. Hank strung a temporary line with wire he'd found behind the blacksmith's, humming under his breath like a man calming bees. Sam read the notice once, then tore it clean at the tack and folded it into his pocket. "Paper doesn't make truth," he said. "It does make a crowd," June answered. "Half the town will read that before noon." Evelyn's voice held steady. Let them read, then let them hear. They walked to the porch. Table Sam flattened his notes and dictated a sworn statement, while June wrote in her careful teacher's hand, I, Samuel Dalton, swear that I have examined Book A, Folio 113, and probate file Pierce, and that the lawful heir named therein is Evelyn Pierce, widow. Further, that any waiver presented today must bear witnesses and date, else it is void. June signed as witness. Hank added his name with a miner's steady block. Sam folded the page and sealed it with a dab of cooled coffee under his thumb. Post it at the school steps, Sam said to June. High as a hymn. I'll go now, she said, and set off at a teacher's brisk pace. Hank coiled the last wire and spat dust. Pikes did more than cut fence, he said. They ran your steers toward the creek to make you chase. You can't be in two places at once. I won't chase, Sam said. I'll stand. Hoofbeats rolled up the lane like thunder choosing a path. Sheriff Harwood appeared with 4 men who liked to be called a posse when paid by the hour. Harwood's face was drawn, the way a decent man looks when easy roads go narrow. He held a folded paper that had never met a judge. Dalton, he called, stopping 10 paces short. I have a warrant to bring the widow to town for her statement and to hold you for interfering with lawful transfer. Sam stepped onto the top porch plank. He placed his boots square, hands open at his sides. Evelyn stood behind his shoulder, not touching him, close enough to be counted. Sheriff, Sam said, voice even, you've got a public reading in 15 minutes and a clerk who's ready to speak. We'll walk with you, but no one crosses this line to take her. Harwood's gaze flicked from Sam's notes to the men behind him, then to the ridge where dust rose again. More eyes coming to watch paper pretend to be law. Lower your tone, Dalton, one of the hirelings snapped, puffed up by numbers. Sam didn't raise his at all. This porch is the line. Wind dragged at the tacked holes where the false notice had been. Somewhere down in the wash, a steer bawled, reminding everyone what would be lost if truth didn't hold. The men on their horses waited for a signal that would turn words into hands. Would Harwood choose paper or proof when the school bell rang? Sam looked from Harwood's strained face to the men behind him and understood the arithmetic. Pride would make driftwood of the day. Patience might turn the current. All right, Sheriff, he said, palms open. I'll ride in with you. No fuss. A murmur moved through the hired men, disappointment dressed as victory. Evelyn touched the porch post, not him, as if bracing the house would brace her. You don't have to. I do, he said softly. Buys time for ink. Harwood exhaled like a man stepping off a hot wagon. Much obliged, he said, almost under his breath. To the men, stand down. No one enters the house. We're going to town. They bound nothing. Sam climbed up into the saddle between 2 riders who smelled of pipe ash and old sweat. Evelyn stood on the porch with June and Hank flanking her. June pressed a wrapped bundle into Sam's hands, biscuits and a folded note. We'll bring Finch, she promised. Sunrise. Hank tipped 2 fingers. Keep your tongue level and your facts numbered. The ride-in was slow enough to make a show. Folks stepped out onto porches. A pair of boys trailed like strays. Brock and Harlan positioned themselves at Main and Willow, pretending surprise when the little parade reached them. Shame, Dalton, Brock called, voice just loud enough. All this for a woman who ain't yours. Sam didn't bite. He watched Sheriff Harwood not take that bait either, which was its own kind of courage. At the jail, a 1-room brick with a tin roof that sang in wind, Harwood opened the door and waved Sam through. The iron latch clicked with a finality that had humiliated better men. Inside smelled of lye, old coffee, and dust. Deputy Cal Merritt looked up from a ledger, young enough to be called son by men who hadn't earned the bar. Right. He shifted, not comfortable with the badge yet. Name? Samuel Dalton, Sam said. He set June's bundle on the bunk and the note on the table, close to the deputy's hand. Cal, you can do a good thing today. Check Book A, Folio 113. Ask Clerk Finch, and ask if any waiver bearing the widow's name has witnesses and a date. No witnesses, no wait. Cal's ears went red the way honest men color when they're handed a test. Sheriff? Harwood rubbed his jaw. You can walk to the courthouse and back, California. Take your time, but be exact. He held Sam's gaze a heartbeat. Exact saves me paperwork. Cal stood, grabbed his hat, and left at a trot that tried to look like a stroll. From the window slit, Sam watched dust hang in the heat. Voices outside swelled. The Pikes had planted themselves where words travel fastest. Harlan waved a folded broadside, notice of fraud, and pinned it to a post with a flourish. "Law's moving, folks," he said. "We'll see her safe by sundown. Inside, Sam D. Open June's parcel. Biscuits, yes, and a stub of pencil, a scrap of paper with her brisk hand. Sunrise, Finch will read, hold steady, tell the deputy, probate file number 208. Spring noted township notes 6B. He smiled despite the iron. A teacher's mind knew where to tuck courage. The door creaked. Brock stepped in with the ease of a man treated as a guest, everywhere he shouldn't be. "Dalton," he said, strolling up to the bars, "we'll be by your place shortly to collect Mrs. Pierce. No need to fret. Family is family. Bring witnesses," Sam said. "Bring the clerk. Bring the truth." Brock's mouth went thin. "Truth is what a town believes at noon." He tapped at the flyer on the outside post with 2 fingers. "And right now, truth leans our way." He left. His boots made a tidy sound on swept boards. Sam sat on the bunk and let the quiet enter. He breathed like he had on drives when storms came sideways, slow, through the nose, counting. The cell had a square of light that crept along the floorboards like a careful animal. He watched it move to keep time from eating him. Across town, Evelyn stood in the ruined garden with a lantern hung low from a nail. June had begged her to rest. She hadn't. She set new lines with twine, bent, pressed, rose, started again. Every motion said, "I am not freight." Hank stacked rails where the fence had been cut and whistled off key. "Town sleeps better when a woman works," he said. "Let 'em." She didn't answer. She planted a second row, then a third. When her hands shook, she steadied them on her skirt. When the flame guttered, she lifted the lantern chimney and trimmed the wick, practical as prayer. Back at the jail, footsteps returned at last. Cal, hat askew, dust on his shoulders, burst in with the cautious excitement of a man holding something delicate. "Sheriff," he said, breathless. "Book A, Folio 113. Jeremiah Pierce, no children, heir at law, the widow. Probate 208 open, no waiver filed. Clerk Finch says he'll read it on the school steps at sunrise. He also says," Cal checked a note, "tell Harwood to bring his good spectacles and his better sense." Harwood's mouth tugged, a smile he didn't allow to finish. "Thank you, Cal." Sam stood. "Then we walk at dawn." Outside, the brothers' voices climbed again, trying to turn air into verdict. Inside, the cell settled to a hush, broken only by the ticking of a wall clock that ran a minute slow. Dawn would come either way. The question was what the town would be when it arrived. Dawn found Dusty Creek gathered on the school steps, breath steaming, boots scuffing chalk dust. The bell rope hung still, as if the town itself was holding it. Sheriff Harwood walked up the center with Sam beside him, unshackled, hat in hand, a deputy at his shoulder, because forms are forms. Evelyn stood near the top stair with June and Hank, chin level, hands folded to keep them from shaking. Brock and Harlan Pike faced the crowd from the opposite side, a rolled paper in Brock's fist and a hired lawyer slick as axle grease at his elbow. Harwood lifted a palm. "We'll keep order. We'll read in daylight," he nodded to Lucius Finch, who clutched Book A like a psalm. "Mr. Finch." Before ink spoke, Brock pitched his voice to Carrie. "Friends, this needn't drag." Widow signed a waiver to return to family. Dalton trespassed on a gentleman's agreement. "We'll spare you the fuss." He snapped his paper open with a showman's flourish. "Here's her mark." June's pencil tapped against her palm. "Witnesses?" she asked. The lawyer adjusted his collar. "Not required under territorial code," Finch said, mild but granite. He opened Book A, found the ribbon at Folio 113, and read like a man who respected words. "Original patent, Jeremiah Pierce, no issue recorded. In the event of death intestate, heir at law, his spouse, Evelyn Pierce." He raised his gaze. "Probate file 208 remains open. No waiver signed before witnesses has been filed. This paper," he nodded at Brock's fluttering, "sheet, has no clerk's stamp and no witness. It is wind." A murmur rippled. The blacksmith, who liked things heavy and proven, grunted, "Wind don't hold iron." Brock recovered fast. "We're not debating sympathy," he said. "We speak of borders." Dalton wants the strip. We offered it fair for her safe return. He's playing hero for land. Sam stepped forward, careful with his words. I want water for my herd, yes, but I won't trade a person for a fence. We have more than feeling here. We have a chain. He held up his own neat page. Patent to Pierce, heir at law to the widow. Any later deal that acts like she's already gone fails, because she isn't. He turned the paper so the lawyer could see the lines, then looked to the crowd. And there's a second flaw you ought to know. The survey the Pikes filed mentions a spring in the township notes, but the sale, pretending to be generous, leaves it out of the price. You don't forget water by accident. That's not a bargain. That's a removal. Hank tipped, his hat, voice dry as creek gravel. I drank from that seat before your surveyor learned his numbers, and I wrote the date in my pocketbook. If a map don't show it, the map's the liar. The lawyer dabbed his brow. Ancillary rights? Don't erase the patent, Finch said, and omission of a material feature implies deceit. Evelyn's voice, steady and unadorned, reached the edge of the crowd. I did not push my husband. I signed nothing. I was sent away like freight. I am a person under the law, and under this sky. Silence met her for a beat. Then two ranch wives nodded like women who had held the line in harder storms. A boy on the railing whispered, She talks like my mother when she's right. Harwood looked older than he had yesterday. He took Brock's paper, turned it once, then again, hunting for a stamp that wouldn't appear. He handed it back. This doesn't hold today. He faced the crowd. Mr. Dalton will be released on his own recognizance pending noon court. Mrs. Pierce is not to be removed. He pointed two fingers at Brock and Harlan. You two stand fast. No more notices, no more fence cutting. If you believe in your claim, you can present it to Judge Halter after dinner like civilized men. Harlan's mouth flattened to a slit. Brock's smile thinned to wire. The lawyer whispered fast and low, sweat beading at his temple despite the morning chill. Sam felt the knot in his chest loosen, not gone, but given air. He touched his brim toward Evelyn and June, then toward Finch. Thank you for letting ink speak. Finch shut Book A with a soft thud. Ink speaks best with listeners. The bell finally swung once, as if granting the town permission to breathe. Folks began to drift, some with relief, some with resentment they'd feed like a stove. Brock leaned in close to Harwood, voice too quiet for most, but Sam caught it. This isn't done, Sheriff. No, Harwood answered, equally low. It's finally begun. By noon, the courthouse steps would have their own weather. What would? Rise when the sealed drawer opened next. By noon, the courthouse steps carried their own weather. Heat rising off stone, talk rippling, the town leaned forward like a single body. Judge Halter was riding in from Willow Draw, folks said, but Sheriff Harwood didn't wait on a robe to keep order. He stood at the landing with Deputy Cal, Lucius Finch clutching Book A, and a narrow bundle tied in twine. Sam took his place to one side, hat low. Evelyn stood between June and Hank, shoulders square, as if bracing for a wave that might lift or drown her. Brock Pike arrived polished and smiling, Harlan a half step back. Their lawyer kept close, whispering like a man soothing a skittish horse. A few ranch hands who owed the Pikes drifted near, trying to look like the public. Harwood lifted his palm. We read in daylight. Mr. Finch. Finch opened Book A to folio 113, his voice plain as bread. Patent to Jeremiah Pierce. No issue. Heir at law. Spouse, Evelyn Pierce. He closed the volume, then touched the twined packet. Additionally, while searching probate file 208, I found a memorandum sealed to the backer. It bears the decedent's hand and my predecessor's countersign. He held it up. Dated 3 months before Mr. Pierce's death. Brock's chin tipped. Convenient. Clerks don't make weather, Finch said. We measure it. He untied the string and unfolded the paper, careful not to tear the age-thin crease. Memorandum. For the avoidance of quarrel upon my passing, I reserve access to the seep at the East Garden for my lawful spouse, so long as she shall live on that land or any adjoining. My brothers are to honor this without suit or sale. Signed, Jeremiah Pierce. Finch tapped the countersignature, witnessed and indexed, then sealed to protect a domestic matter from public talk. A quiet fell that wasn't quite silence, more like the moment a train slows before it stops. June's breath left her audibly, a prayer answered by ink. Hank nodded once, like a man seeing a river remember its own bed. Evelyn's hand went to her mouth and then steadied at her collar. He wrote that sober, she said, as if testing the thought against memory. He had sober days. Harlan's voice came out thin. Forgery. Finch lifted both brows. It's filed in 208 with my office seal, dated and indexed in the clerk's hand. If it's forgery, it's an old and careful one committed by a man who gained nothing. The lawyer wiped at his brow. Ancillary rights become primary when expressly reserved, Finch said, and when a sale omits a material feature, such as a spring referenced in earlier notes, that omission implies deceit. Harwood turned, slow as a gait that won't be rushed, to the Pike brothers. I've got fence cutting, cattle scattering, a false notice posted under color of law, and now papers filed that tell less than they know. He took Brock's waiver, held it to the light, and snorted when it showed no stamp. This is wind, and the kind that stinks. He looked to Cal. Deputy, relieve. These gentlemen of any documents they're carrying and see them to a cool bench inside. We'll call it holding on suspicion of fraud and attempted dispossession, pending Judge Halter. Brock laughed, short and mean. You'll answer for this, Sheriff. I will, Harwood said, and I'll sleep. He flicked a glance toward Sam. Mr. Dalton, your recognizance is satisfied. Mrs. Pierce, you are not to be removed. The spring access stands until the court says otherwise, which I doubt it will. Sam stepped forward, not gloating. Sheriff, I ask for a record of fence repair by those who cut it, and a public apology to the widow for slander. Nothing fancy, just straight. Harwood nodded. Noted. Judge can order restitution. As for apology, he faced the crowd. I can't legislate a man's heart, but I can say plain. The law recognizes Mrs. Pierce. Speak of her as such. June's eyes shone. Thank you. Hank touched his hat brim toward Evelyn. Paper caught up with what we already knew. Evelyn turned to the steps, voice steady enough to carry. I am not freight. I will work where I choose. I thank those who stood and those who listened. She paused. I don't ask for shame to be heaped, just for it to stop. For a heartbeat, Dusty Creek looked at itself. 2 ranch wives moved first, crossing to lay hands on Evelyn's forearm. Small, ordinary solidarity. The blacksmith grunted approval. Even a pair of hands who owed the Pikes studied their boots. Sam felt something inside him ease, the old sting of keeping silent while his brother was wronged. He met Harwood's eye. The sheriff looked tired, but right with himself. Mr. Dalton, Harwood said, formal now, see to your fence. Deputy will take statements. Clerk Finch, hold those papers like salvation. Finch smiled the faint smile of a man whose tools had finally mattered. Gladly. The crowd thinned, turning noon back into every day. On the last step, Evelyn stood in the honest sun, wind tugging a loose strand of hair. Sam stepped beside her without touching. We'll fix the fence, he said. Then we'll plant again. Plant what lasts, she answered. But after a storm breaks, what shape does a home choose for its calm? By late afternoon, the courthouse heat thinned to a kinder warmth. Judge Halter finally rode in, boots dusty, temper even. He heard the pieces quickly, Book A, the probate note, the seep at the garden lot, and signed a short order that read like plain talk. The false waiver was void. The Pikes would repair the cut fence within 3 days under the deputy's eye. Any slander printed or spoken about Evelyn Pierce would cease. Restitution for scattered cattle would be set after tally. He added a line that felt like a hand on a shoulder. The widow is a person under the law. Treat her as such. Sheriff Harwood posted the order on the board outside the jail and didn't hurry with his tax. Let folks read it twice, he told Cal, who nodded like a young man learning the shape of his job. Inside, Brock stared at the far wall, smiling that narrow smile men wear when the game shifts. Harlan rubbed his wrists as if rope burned where there'd been none. Sam walked back to Bitter Mesa alongside Evelyn, June, and Hank. The road had changed somehow, as if the country itself had relaxed its jaw. At the ranch, the broken sections of fence lay where they'd fallen, mute evidence of pride's bad aim. Sam set his hat on the porch rail, rolled his sleeves, and started sinking new posts. Hank measured with his eye and hummed, a tune old as creek beds. June stacked rails with the same precision she used on spelling lists. Evelyn brought water, then took a post hole digger and matched Sam's rhythm, steady and exact. Words weren't necessary. The work spoke all afternoon. Near sundown, Deputy Cal and 2 townsmen arrived with tools. "Judge says the Pikes repair what they broke," Cal reported, "and I'm here to witness. But they're delayed getting religion." A trace of humor crossed his face. "We can start the ledger," Sam handed him a pencil and a scrap torn from his own book. "Every post, every rail," he said. "Ink saves arguments." By the time the first stars pricked through, the line stood true again. Wind combed the grass as if checking their work. Sam leaned on the last post, chest heaving the way it does after a clean job. Evelyn brushed dirt from her skirt and looked toward the garden lot. The storm's flat had lifted. Small green spears pushed like stubborn breaths. They ate at the porch table, nothing fancy, beans, biscuits, late coffee. June tapped the judge's order where she'd set it under a mug. "Paper did its duty," she said. "Now we do ours." Hank rose, tugging his brim. "Mine's early beds and a burrow that hates mornings," he said, and ambled off into the blue hour. When the porch quieted, Sam took his ledger from the shelf and closed it gently, as if not every account needs balancing on paper. "I need to tell you something," he said to Evelyn, eyes on the porch boards. "Years back, men told a lie on my brother. I kept still because I thought stillness was peace. It wasn't. Today, when I spoke, it felt like paying a debt I'd let gather interest." Evelyn's fingers traced the rim of her cup. "I need to tell you something too," she said. "Most days with my husband were small, good days, sober days. The bad ones were thunder. After he died, I feared all love was weather that turned. When you stood on that porch and did not raise your voice, when you chose paper, not fists, it felt like shelter, not a trap." Sam met her eyes. They sat with that a breath longer than comfort requires. And then he stood. "Walk the boundary?" he asked. They followed the fence as the evening drew its line around the place. At the east garden, the little spring hummed, unbothered by men's arguments. Water caught the last light and threw it back in a broken silver ribbon. Evelyn knelt and cupped her palm, drank, and let the rest fall to the roots of a bean start. "Thank you," she said, not to him alone. A week later, under the cedar's hush, Clerk Finch stood with a folded paper while June and Hank watched like kin. No preacher, just the clerk's careful voice and a promise made without ceremony. Sam and Evelyn signed their names and then stood very still, as if listening for something hidden to settle into place. Finch cleared his throat, pleased with the neatness, and slipped away. June hugged them both and cried once, quick and honest. Hank said, "Plant what lasts," and knocked his hat against his thigh as if dust could bless. Summer took hold. The garden rose on its mended ridges, bread cooled on the sill. Cal rode by with receipts for rails replaced and a note from Harwood that said simply, "Fence stands. So does the town." On a nail by the kitchen door, Sam hung a modest watch he'd bought off a peddler, not his father's, but close enough. Time, he'd decided, should be kept where love can see it. At dusk, they walked the boundary again, palms brushing, saying little. The seep murmured, tireless. In a world that liked to shout, their life began like water over stone, steady, clear, and bent toward home.